Last week I released a music video for a pop-punk instrumental track that was completely out of the blue and unannounced because, frankly, I felt like making it and I had the inspiration and the time to pull it off. And it also means I can use it as an excuse to talk about basic music video editing, which is presumably why you're here, right? I wanted to make a tutorial that wasn't specific to any one piece of software, so hopefully anything you learn here will be transferable to whatever software you have or whatever software you happen to acquire. This is like a demonstration of theory stuff rather than a follow along at home tutorial, but if you do want to follow along at home, that's fine. If you need to know, the software I'm using is called Vegas Movie Studio HD Platinum 11, which is the least catchy name ever and also doesn't exist anymore, but you can get current versions of Vegas Movie Studio for not very much money at all. It's not Premiere Pro, but it works fine. And it costs way less than Premiere Pro. After the tutorial, I'll talk a little bit about the cameras I used and all that kind of stuff, so let's begin. Now, most of my projects for YouTube editing and that kind of thing will have 5 or 6 folders for score, for audio clips, all that different stuff. But for today's purposes, we're keeping it simple. I've got my main video files in video files, which is me playing at the camera. I've got B-roll, which is other stuff, so like close-ups of speakers, like macro lens stuff of my guitar. And I've also got some screen capture of the actual Cubase project as well, which is nifty. So I'm going to drag and drop all of those initial video files on there. And I also need my music. That's going to be quite important. Version 2, here we go. I don't even think this is the final mix. So I've imported all of my video files, and what I need to do now is give them each a video track and an audio track, which is a pain in the butt, but is sort of, you know, going to be crucial down the line. When I was recording the footage, I had a microphone, the internal microphone on the camera, recording the room, so the track being played through the speakers in the studio was being picked up by the camera and also allowing me to play in time. So what that means is I can now sync it up pretty perfectly with what we have here. So I'm increasing the waveform size so I can actually see it, and then I'm going to solo the audio from the camera and we're going to listen through. Now we can actually hear me playing more than we can hear the backing track, which is fine. So now we're just going to listen to the track and try to work out where I play that note. So kick, snare, kick, dom, it's there. And you've got to like hover your cursor over it to make sure you've got it there. Let's unsolo that. So now we just need to, this is basically visually lining things up. That hit here, where we see the audio sort of is this big balloony thing, is the same as this hit here. So if we solo it, good. I'm going to lower the quality so we can see it a bit better. So now, if we listen to the 2 bits of audio, it actually looks like I'm playing it, and if we get rid of that audio entirely from the camera, looks about right. So now that we've achieved that, we can get rid of this audio. So I'm going to ungroup it from the video clip and get rid of it. And I'm actually going to change the titles here. Track and cam audio. I'm going to change this into cam audio as well, because I'll probably use it as cam audio as well. So now we've just got to do the same thing with every other piece of music. So some of it's a little trickier if the clip that you've recorded doesn't start at the beginning of the piece of music, because that first sync was really easy, and some of the other videos are going to be really easy because there's a kick, snare, kick, first note played on guitar, you line up that first note, you're done, whole thing's fine. If I started recording halfway through, which was stupid of me, and I shouldn't have, but I did, I've got to find other recognisable bits. So in this example we've got the bridge, which that only happens at one point, so that'll be easy enough to sync up. Taking it up, and once you've got it in pretty much the right place, don't be afraid to nudge it back and forth ever so slightly, just to get it perfect. You can use your ear and your brain. So that's 2 of them synced up, and we can get rid of that audio.
Now I'm syncing the rest and I'm doing the things, and then this one took ages and that's why this got so long.
Okay, so everything's synced up. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tracks. 1, 2, 3. 3 of them are the entire thing. One's very nearly the entire thing, and 1, 2, 3, 4 of them are just the second half for some reason. We also have a little bit of B-roll for some reason, which is me playing with the camera lens. The way that I do this is I try to work out which one of these shots, which one of these angles I like basically the most, or that is the most consistently good, consistently fine, and I'm basically just gonna cut out the bits of that I don't like and then look at where it's way too long. So I'll go through that step by step now. So let's find one of these. I think the one I used was either this one or this one down here. I'm going to put this over here and call it the master shot, because the editing of everything else is going to revolve around this. Now I should say that this isn't the way to do music video editing. This is the way that works for me with my resources and my time. So feel free to use this in conjunction with any other techniques or ideas you have. This is just the time effective way that I do things. And also we're talking about a music video that I knocked out in a day, so like, I'm not saying it doesn't matter. I enjoyed it, whatever. Look, shut up, man. Let's have a look through with this one soloed and at the top. Let's maybe break it up by sections. So let's say we've got the intro here, and I actually forget to play the very first note, which is good. So let's scrap that up to basically the repeat of that section, and that happens here. I'm also going to move the track up so it's right next to the visual I'm editing. I'm going to cut that there. So I'm going to put that bit in the bin. And we've got a new cut that happens exactly on that beat. And we know it's on that beat because this is where the peak is. And like most music, this section has a kick on the 1. So it's really easy to edit to that 1 beat because there's a big kick there. And that comes in on that shot. So let's maybe say, how long do I want to stick with that? The most I feel I could get away with at this point is a section. So when we get to the chorus, I'm going to get rid of it. And the chorus is this kick drum here. We're working on 30 frames per second, I think, but the frame rate currently doesn't allow us to cut over that kick. The kick actually happens between that frame and that frame, which is a pain in the butt. But there's not much we can do about that. When it comes down to it, a single frame isn't a massive deal. In music, it's slightly more of a deal, but there's not much we can do with that. So I'm going to cut it here, so it happens just before. Let's change it up a bit. So I'm going to find a halfway point of this section, and I'm going to bring this clip back in. 2, 3, 4, which is there. That kick drum again. So I'm just going to bring that clip over. There I am again, and they're going to bring it out at the end of that chorus, which is this kick drum here. Cool. So I'm just going to repeat that for the rest of the song. I'm going to find sections that I want to keep this master shot, sections that I don't. Do with a boo, and then I'm making the cuts, and then cutting it on the beats, and then it's really good, and it's going to be great. Okay, so that's the master track done, and we can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 bits where I'm using it, and then a few gaps in between. So now my job is basically to fill in those gaps. And the first thing I want to do is see if there's anything specific to the track that's being played. For example, a guitar solo, which there is one little bitty guitar solo, so I'm going to put those close-ups of that guitar solo over that section, because that makes the most sense. And if there happen to be any bits of the master track that don't suit that, I'm just going to put them in the bin. Obviously, the downside of doing a one-man band type situation is that the only instrument actually being recorded here is guitar. If we had drums, bass, vocals, keyboards, whatever, these could all be things that I could rely on. So most obviously you would use a close-up of a vocalist doing the vocals whilst they're singing, or the actions they are describing unfolding, like a traditional music video. This is not a traditional music video, so we're kind of limited in the shots that we have. Next step is specific stuff like guitar solos, which I believe is this track here.
Guitar solo.
There's two approaches you could take here. Once you've found a section that you want, you could drag and drop that onto the master track, so you only have to worry about one track actually being live. But if you were doing something like color correction or adding some kind of visual effect to these clips, you would want to make sure that you keep the different locations, the different filming locations, the different angles, the different lighting setups on separate tracks, and then affect them individually. I don't want to do that in this situation because I don't have time, so I'm just going to stick everything on this master track at the top. So the guitar solo is done. I'm just going to see if there's any of these clips from this track that I can use elsewhere, and I guess I'm going to try and focus on filling in gaps at the moment.
Filling in gaps, but with all the gaps, just some of the gaps.
Right, so as you can see, there's not really any pattern to what I'm doing. I found a shot that I don't love it, but it does fill a specific purpose. It's the only one I have of the guitar solo, so actually I've used it for that purpose, and I've put it in here a few other times as well. So now I'm actually just going to delete that track with the excess. You don't need to do that, but I find it visually distracting to have a lot of different tracks. Again, this is just me, might not work for you, whatever, and that's probably completely counter-logical to how people actually edit. But again, working within a time frame here. The next track, we only have the latter two-thirds of the track, so let's see what we got here. There's some good shots in there. I think it's quite an interesting angle. I would probably try to reframe it so this big pile of my old graphics card and a laminator are not in shot. That was a mistake in filming. Time frames.
Filling in more gaps and music.
Right, so now we're basically at a point where we've filled every gap. There is something for the entire track, so we could call it done there if we wanted to. But what I'm going to do now is look for any bits where it just feels a bit too long and see if I can plug those with shots from here. So for example, this one's quite long. It's almost half of that outro, and I feel like as the music video progresses you can do more and more cuts, so you can do more and more interesting stuff because you've established these shots earlier on. It's like music, you don't start full weird because you'll turn people off. You've got to gradually introduce the different stuff. So I'm going to try and add in this shot halfway through maybe. So I'm going to put this second shot here in there, and then cut back to it again just for the sake of visual interest. Cool, that really divides that one up quite nicely. So yeah, we've got a couple other shots here that we can use. For the purpose of today's video, I'm not going to bother. Having basically plugged all of these gaps, we have something going on for the entire track now. I'm going to get rid of these other ones, even though I didn't use them. If this was your project, or if this was me actually doing this project rather than doing it for an example video a week later, I would actually use every different shot, make sure I've got all these different interesting angles, and you would have a better finished product because you've got greater variety of shots. So now what I want to do is talk about B-roll. If you have the ability to have different folders or different media bins in your video projects, I suggest you do that, because I'm going to bring in now my B-roll, which is a variety of different shots which are all either tangentially related to the music video, the piece of music, or they're a non-live rendition of it. So for example, I've got some footage here which is just me holding my DSLR up to the screen of Cubase, and I've got some other ones which are the track being played, so you can see my monitor levels and you can see my speakers. Just stuff that looks kind of interesting but is not me playing a guitar. So I'm going to get rid of the audio because actually that's not related to the shots in any way. We also have a few close-ups. I don't know if I actually did use the macro for that, but they're just like close-ups of the guitar that we can throw in. And lastly, we have screen caps of Cubase, so the drum MIDI and the actual project, so the mixes and the EQ and the maximizer and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to create a couple new video tracks. First thing I'm going to do is sync up this again. This is actually a little trickier because, as you can see, there's no audio associated with that clip. Oops. But what we can do is look at the clip and see when the actual drum hits happen, because this is a clip of the drums, the MIDI track for the drums. So I know that this is my kick, this is my snare flam, and this is another kick. So as soon as this little play bar goes past the first kick, we know that's where the track needs to start. So if that syncs up, yeah, very nearly. So that needs to be here. That looks pretty good. Let's play it along half quality. That looks pretty good. So this is basically the closest we can get to having a drum kit in the video. What I'm going to do actually is punch in the clip to edit out stuff like the date and the fact that I've got pod farm down here or whatever. I'm going to zoom right in so it actually looks like, I don't know, you just see a bit more detail. It's a little more fun that way. So now we're going to do exactly the same thing. We're going to go through, we're going to see where looks a bit boring, where we just don't want to have guitar, where we can throw this clip in. And if that means swapping out some of the stuff you've put in, that's fine. Don't worry about putting stuff in the bin. It's all good.
Putting stuff in the bin, replacing it with media.
So I'm using this to highlight little things like drum fills, and I've only used it 3 times, in the intro, in the middle, and towards the end. And I think that's a good way of making sure that you don't get tired of any special shots like this. So now I'm going to do exactly the same thing with the screen cap of my mixer. I'm again going to punch in ever so slightly to get rid of the date. We can even do things if we really wanted to, like zoom in on the spectrum, on the frequency spectrum for the EQ, or even on the faders. We can do any stuff like that. For the moment, I'm just going to position it on the faders. The cool thing about this is we're not going to hang on these shots for ages, so it doesn't matter if we lose a little bit of resolution, and actually this is quite high res anyway, so don't worry about it. So we also need to sync that up with the intro, don't we? So let's find where the first piece of audio comes in, and again that first hit is going to be on the kick track, which I think is one of these. Let's see. Oh, there it is. Right, so that frame there is where that kick hit comes in. Let's find that kick hit. There he is. And let's see how that looks. Perfect. So again, we're going to do exactly the same thing. I'm going to find a place to have that at the start, the middle, and the end.
Now I'm adding the bits with phase and things, and add a different perspective.
So now it's just a case of, do I want to use these other shots? And they are kind of fun. So are there any sections of the video where it's appropriate to have something that's sort of only tangentially related, like the guitars, close-ups, or the Cubase project from a camera? So I want to say tangentially related, I mean it is the project, but it's not being played at the same point. Everything else that I've got here is a representation of the thing that is happening, that you are hearing at that same moment. These are not so. The sort of break fill bit, where it goes a bit empty, that could be something different. That's just the only bit that really sticks out to me as being, I don't know, worth having something that is different in this way. It's kind of hard to put into words, but cool. And then let's stick this guitar one on another one of those breaks. And that's good, because actually I'm doing something weird with my hair at that point, so it's good to distract from that. That works. And that is basically the process of how I do it. And it took me, the timer here says 40 something minutes, 35, 40 minutes, I think. So aside from actually recording it, you can do the editing inside of an hour. And obviously you take a little bit more time than I did just now, so maybe use that full hour to get a good project. So this is basically what I did for the video that I have put out, but it's not going to be exactly the same because, you know, it's slightly different. There'll be videos in different orders or whatever, but the effect is much the same. It will be, in essence, the same video. Cool, so let's quickly recap the key points. Firstly, record all of your video with some kind of audio track that will allow you to sync up the footage before editing. Number 2, choose 1 or 2 consistent video shots to form the bulk of your project and then edit around those. This is my way of kind of getting started and stuck in, which can often be really hard. Sometimes the hardest bit, to be honest, is just getting started. Number 3, make cuts on or as close to beats as you possibly can using the waveform as a visual aid. Number 4, make more cuts the further into the video you get. Don't show the viewer everything from the very beginning because it will get tiring to watch. Lastly, let's talk about gear. I filmed this on the Canon C100, which is our default camera at Odd Creative Limited, and I used a standard wide angle lens on most of the shots, and then some of them are a 18 to 55mm lens. In terms of lights, I'm using these Amazon Basics lights, which are the same ones I'm using right now to light my face. For the color lighting, I'm using this LED single Par. It's an ADJ American DJ Hex Par, which I have for fun reasons. I use my DSLR for B-roll, this same one that I'm using right now. This is weird. Anyway, I use that for B-roll. For the screen capture, I used my Elgato HD60S, which has just started working again, miraculously. The music was all written in Cubase 8.5, the drums and bass were Kontakt, and the guitar I'm using is a Cort CR Custom played through the Pod Farm by Line 6. Lastly, a reminder of the software I'm using. This is Vegas Movie Studio HD Platinum 11, which isn't available anymore, but an updated version is, and is not expensive. So I'm pretty sure I covered all the bases there. Sorry if I missed anything, but that's it for this week. I will see you next Friday, 4 PM GMT. Remember to subscribe if you want to see more videos like this, and leave any questions in the comment section below. That's what it's for, I think. See you later.